Welcome to Film Phreeks. This is Justin Llewellyn.
With Eddie Williams.
And here we're talking about one of the most popular franchises from the 1990s, which is Scream, directed by Wes Craven. Now, a little backstory on this. Now, for those of you who are familiar with our retrospective of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, when New Nightmare came out in 1994, it was the first film that Wes Craven did that he wanted to pretty much bring a kind of a meta approach by bringing the horror into our world, into making things a lot more self-aware with how we deal with horror in today's society, in today's world, in what would be in our world. And when Scream came out, it was a big deal when it came out because not only was it a good slasher, not only was it a slasher film that Wes Craven directed after coming off of New Nightmare, but it's also the one that that redefined the slasher genre.
Yep.
And all the films that came out before it, they were pretty much in a decline. Scream was pretty much the first one to make it where the 90s were a lot more like... It was the first one to make it where the characters are more aware of the situations in an ironic way.
I did love the 90s theme it has in that. Oh my god, dude, the music and everything.
Yeah.
And the look of the how they dressed brought me back to my the old good days.
Yeah, I grew up with this movie a lot, because growing up, even to this day, I consider the first Scream to be one of my all-time favorite slasher films. And pretty much the story goes, you have a killer, or basically it's a killer who's stalking these teenagers in this small town called Woodsboro. And these are teenagers that are pretty much are aware of movies and stuff, and they're having to, be aware of kind of the rules that are established in slasher films.
Yeah. And
in an ironic twist, the killer is actually referencing that as he's making his way to kill the victims.
Yeah.
And director Wes Craven teamed up with his writer Kevin Williamson into not only making it a very straightforward film, but also doing a lot more humorous and meta humor that's attached to it by making the characters mix comedy into it.
Yeah.
Because basically, if for those of you, for everyone that's seen the film, you obviously know this was Drew Barrymore's film that she did after this was Drew Barrymore's role as an adult that she did after a while, like one of her because the movie starts with a very young Drew Barrymore who is on the phone with the killer, and the killer is referencing movies like Nightmare on Elm Street, the movies that Wes Craven did.
Yeah.
And he's also basically telling her that, look, are you not going to go out with me and all that? And then he's basically stalking her and shit. Because he tells her, he's like, I want to know who I'm looking at. And then he's like, what did you say? He's like, I want to know who I'm talking to. And then you start to realize that this killer is pretty much somewhere near where she's at.
Yeah, I do like how when he taunts his victims, he talks about movies and all that stuff, which, that's one of those, still to this day, it's one of those one-of-a-kind films, one-of-a-kind films that only still does that to this day.
Yeah.
It's the only one that's ever done that.
So. I mean, there's probably been other movies that have done that too, but this was the first one, at least in the 90s, that was making it to where, because the killer is actually aware of, movies and shit, And so we get a really great opening, which involves the death of Drew Barrymore,
which was pretty brutal.
Fucking brutal when she gets gutted and then she gets hanged on a tree.
But wasn't she hung by her intestines?
Yeah, her intestines were full, by her intestines and shit.
Yeah,
and we also see that her boyfriend gets killed too because he gets his intestines ripped out as well.
Yeah,
so that was fucking brutal.
So as she goes through the school, we see people getting picked off one by one.
Yeah. We get introduced to Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell, who's dealing with her own story, which involves it's about to be the 1 year anniversary of her mother's death,
which was a famous Woodsboro murder
that happened.
Yeah,
that happened, and supposedly it had to do with a guy named Cotton Weary who went to prison on the murder of her mother.
But due to lack of evidence, after doing so many years in prison, he got out earlier.
Yeah. And so as the movie progresses, you start to see a lot of the emotional stable that Sydney is going through with not only her dad, but also with her boyfriend too, because she's dealing with a lot of like drama involved with her mom, and she's still a virgin. So I mean, they're bringing up the whole rules later on in established film that in order to survive a horror movie, you got to be a virgin, you know. And so I got to tell you, man, this is like just going through this movie alone. Every scene is just so like memorable. You have characters that are your typical '90s. You know, you get like the Stu and the Billy equivalent characters.
Which why I appreciate the '90s so much, because the '90s wasn't like it wasn't so like grouped out like it is today. Like '90s, you can have like I mean, you didn't have really strongly preppy people from those times. A lot of people were like, I like the whole, like, where people just dress it, like, grungy or just regular, you know? There was nothing, you weren't a group, really.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And
the music was amazing in the film.
Oh, yeah, too. I love some of the covers they do, like Don't Fear the Reaper cover they do at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then they have, my favorite song is actually the Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and plus you also got the other characters we get introduced, which is Dewey, the deputy of the town, who's investigated by David Arquette, and he's always been one of my favorite like actors because
he's known to really do a lot of just comedy.
Yeah, and this one it shows too because even though he's playing a more like straightforward deputy, he is kind of a dimwit, you know, because he's always like trying to get everything on the case, but he does some like missteps here and there.
Yeah.
But you also get introduced to Gail Weathers, played by Courtney Cox,
who is playing a news lady who's actually there for the 1-year anniversary to talk to Sydney.
Yeah, and then there's some drama that happens between Sydney and her because she feels like that story couldn't be like that's something that she wants to stay out of private life. And then she, like, punches her in one scene, you know, and
but after her bodies start falling throughout the film, you know, one of them being Harry Van Winkle.
Yeah, there was Henry Winkler, who plays the principal, which was surprising, because I watched and I was like, wow,
I know, that was a weird casting, but yeah, it's still doable. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool seeing something he takes that I don't think he's ever done a horror film.
No, I don't think he has. So. But yeah, it was cool seeing him, and plus you also got one of my favorite characters in the film, which is Randy, played by Jamie.
I want to tell you right now, I gotta agree with you in this. This is one that me and you agree with the most. Randy, the movie man, the video store, the Randall Phil too, the guy. Yeah. I love this dude. I'm gonna tell you right now, he's probably like my top 30, top 20 favorite character ever made.
Yeah,
like he's just like, I don't know, something about him. He's awesome, dude. I like.
He is. Dude. He's a guy because he's the one who sets up the rules later in the film of how you can't have.
He's pretty much their guide.
Yeah, he's pretty much the one who's all aware of the cliches that happen in slasher films. Who sets up the rules, and plus, he's a guy I would have a beer with every day and be talking like we are now.
Like he kind of reminds me of like somebody I would like if video stores still like really existed today. I could fucking so you'd find me in the weekends hanging out with.
Yeah. And plus, you know, and as the story goes along, you start to see that not only does Wes Craven do great, Wes Craven does great with not only mixing a lot of straightforward scenes, but he does a great mix of the comedy as well. Because when the comedy does work, it blends in well with the situation that's happening. Yeah. You know, and plus the brutality in this one's really fucking gory. Like especially when you have
the
garage scene when you got Rose McGowan who's going in because what happens is they set up a house party to celebrate pretty much because the school is on like watch because of the events that are happening in the town, and so they get a house party, and this is the night that Sydney's mother's had passed away after a year before. And Rose McGowan plays her friend, and she goes in this garage, and she gets confronted by the killer, and then she's trying to, like, throw bottles and shit at him, and then she gets in this really gruesome death scene where she's, like, trying to get out of the doggy escape, but then, like, the killer turns the garage door on, and then it fucking pushes her up, and then she gets, like, just, you know,
well, eliminated. At the same time, we get, like, scenes where we get one where Sydney, she's out up there getting fucked, losing her virginity with her boyfriend. Meanwhile, we get a cliche because, the screams were so good about this, about bringing movie cliches in this film. They're sitting there watching the first Halloween.
Yeah, and they bring up how he's like, when are we going to see Jamie Lee's tits? He's like, no, not until Trading Places.
Yeah.
And shit like that. But what's funny is that there's a later scene where Randy is watching the movie, and then the killer's kind of like right behind him and shit.
Yeah.
And then pretty much says, it's your...
Or the part where what's-his-face, Matthew goes out there, he goes...
Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, he goes, I'll be back.
Woo!
Oh, yeah. Dude, I enjoyed this movie, man. Fucking from the beginning to the end. I fucking enjoyed this movie. It's probably one of my top 20 favorite slasher films ever made.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It was for me, too. And plus, it's one of my favorite Wes Craven films, because not only is it a great, fresh, at the time, it was a fresh start for slasher films to do something different for once, but it was also great to see, something that was good for the 90s, because we got an iconic figure with that mask, because that mask they used for the killer was actually very popular in the Halloween stores.
I believe that was 90s, as far as 90s per se, that was a decade that created its own version. Like you got the 70s who did Halloween, that created the Halloween, and created Texas Chainsaw. You get the 80s, did Freddy and Jason.
Yeah.
Then you get the 90s, I see Scream. And in 2000s on now, it's Saw.
Yeah. So the mask they used was already popular in stores, but this makes it a more kind of a realistic approach where that mask can be used by anybody.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's what I really loved about it going forward too.
So we get to towards the end where all these people start getting killed at the party, and then we get revealed that Billy, the boyfriend she was fucking, is actually behind the sick killings.
Yeah, both her and Stu.
And Stu, which is played by Matthew Leonard, and they're pretty much just fucking doing they're crazy, man. They're stabbing each other and just
that
playing
was
all these
brutal
games.
shit right there.
They said, we're going to frame you for this.
Because not only that, they're trying to... They want to also kill her dad, too, and then claim that Sydney killed him, and then that she tried to kill Stu and him. Mm-hmm. So that's why they're stabbing each other. And so this gets this cool climax where Sydney tries to get away, and then she all of a sudden puts the ghost face costume on, and then she fucking fucks with them, and then all of a sudden Stu tries to kill her, and then she fucking slams that TV on his head.
Killing
that was a brutal death.
And then he gets popped.
Yeah, and then Billy gets popped by her, and then all of a sudden she gets shot multiple times, and then finally shot in the head, because they do... I like how Randy pulls up... Randy always has this cool... Randy makes a quote that will come in handy later in the later films, where the killer always comes back for one last scare, and then Cindy's like, not in my movie, and then after she blows his head off. So,
what do you give the first movie?
Me, I'm giving it probably a 10 out of 10. It's definitely one of my favorite slasher films I can watch this day and still. Well, then again, I'm gonna give it a 9.75 out of 10. The only thing I did kind of say probably hold it back just a little bit from a 10 was probably the just some of the meta humor I thought could have been a little more going more into it, because the sequels kind of did more of that. So the meta humor's there, but I kind of liked it a little better with some of the later films.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a 9.5 out of 10 for Scream. I enjoyed it. I loved it. Everything, I almost didn't see there was little flaws. I just wish it could have been longer and did more. Yeah. But it still did what it did, and I still appreciate what it did. So it's a 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah, it's definitely a 9.75 out of 10 for me. So then after the success of the first Scream, which revitalized the slasher genre, we had countless other ones. Before we get into the next one, we got countless other movies that came out after that kind of Urban Legend. I know he did last summer. Yeah, and these were actually, believe it or not,
it started a trend of movies doing constant these Faculty kind of felt the same.
Well, it's funny because Scream is also the first one where, and this was big in the 90s, where all the box covers of later horror films would have that cover where the people people's faces are on there.
Yeah.
And you'd have, like, the killer in the background and shit.
It was famous for that, the late 90s,
Yeah. And so we get to Scream 2, which has probably one of my favorite opening scenes of all time.
Yeah.
It opens with a theater.
Jada Smith, yeah.
It opens with Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps, who go to a movie that's actually based on the events of the first film. Mm-hmm. And it's called Stab. Mm-hmm. They go there, and you think it's going to start out like kind of your typical, go to the movies and shit. But what really drew me off was that in this theater, like, this killer is actually there, but he's able to hide himself because everyone in the theater is wearing, like, the Ghostface costume. Yeah. So I love that shit.
Yeah, and it was pretty cool because they're in the theaters. It's another homage to people going to theaters, and the movie's getting so famous that people come up and show up dressed up in the movies. And while she's sitting there, Omar Epps goes to the bathroom. And he's stabbed, an iconic scene which is used to make fun of and scary movie and all that. But he's stabbed through the cheeks and killed. And, well, the guy, he was wearing a certain, like, one of the things, the scream uniform. And basically the killer sits right next to her. And basically, while, like, everybody's celebrating all the deaths, and you get to see, like, a reenactment and you get like maybe the reboot feel.
Yeah, because
even though this is before the time we started doing a bunch of reboots, that it's kind of like ahead of its time in the reboot thing, because it's like you're rebooting like the events of what happened and shit like that, or doing like a true story movie type thing that we see a lot these days. And like she's sitting there, and that's when she starts getting stabbed. She suddenly starts getting stabbed and all that stuff, and it's pretty brutal because he's like stabbing her like 100 times.
Yeah, like stabbing her constantly in the back and shit, and then
he's just popping up all over the place and stuff.
And what makes it really suspenseful in this part is that everyone who's wearing those masks, those costumes, could be the killer.
And so then she looks up at the crowd, and everybody starts seeing her bleeding, and she dies, and the movie kicks on.
Yeah, I love that opening scene.
Yep.
And then we get introduced back to Sydney, who's now in college. She's in a Ohio town this time, and she's pretty much going through. She's now fully gotten through everything with her mother, like from the first movie and everything. Yep. And now she's with Jerry O'Connell's character. She got a new boyfriend, and now and she's also learning about the murders and everything. And this is the first time they introduce caller ID, because remember how in the first one that was kind of new at the time. This time they started to introduce caller ID as a thing with actually seeing the numbers. God. Yeah,
those the old days, man. Where it didn't even come with the phone, like you had to attach it to the phone.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the old days, man.
Yeah, but we get introduced to her back into going to college, and she's hanging out with Randy, and this is probably one of my most iconic scenes of the movie. We get introduced back to Randy again, where he's having a scene in film class where he's talking about sequels and shit.
Oh yeah, and then you actually get like, which is really weird because they actually have a famous guy in this movie,
Joshua Leonard. I'm sorry, Joshua. What was his last name? Joshua Lawrence or something?
Something like that. But he plays in the Mighty Ducks series, and he's famous in a lot of 90s shit like Faculty and all that. But yeah, he's only doing like a small cameo.
Him and
Sarah
Michelle Gellar and Timothy Olyphant.
Yeah, and it's basically these big actors and actresses come in this role just to talk about films. They're all in a film class, and they're arguing about best sequels, which is actually, believe it or not, and as little as this scene could be, this is actually a scene that, I don't know, I can actually probably watch longer of, because I just enjoy watching this.
I know the dialogue written the dialogue written by Kevin Williamson in the scene is so like very catchy and very like realistic. I go back and watch that scene repeatedly, because they're talking about how sequels aren't as good as the first ones, and then they bring up how, well, we do have other movies like Terminator 2, Aliens, and then Godfather Part 2. House 2, you know?
And you get a lot of debates where people are... I enjoy that. I actually fucking like that.
You got Randy saying stuff.
It kind of makes me wish I was in a class like that.
That's what I'm saying. If I ever took college classes, believe me, I would be like, yeah, but I can tell you there's some other ones. Empire. Yeah. So, yeah, we get after that one, which is a good scene, and then we get to... Dewey comes back after recovering from the first one because he got stabbed.
He got stabbed, but he also heard about the killings in theater, and then Gail comes back as a news lady yet again, and this time everybody's basically from the past that survived the events comes back and pretty much is worried that the killings are going to spread back to her, and it's going to happen all over again, and then that's when Randy kind of tells her, hey, sequels, and he's starting to, you can tell he's nervous about something. Yeah. Because he feels like the sequel is happening.
That's what I'm saying. It's like the whole sequelitis has come in real life, that the murder, there's a copycat killer who's doing the events from the first movie. Mm-hmm. So as the movie goes, you start to see the struggle that Sydney's going through with trying to basically conquer her fear, because the whole film goes through with this.
Believe it or not, in the first one we didn't really see much of this. It was more just brought up, like, through news. But this one we actually get Cotton Weary. And he's actually free from prison now.
Yeah, because this one, he's free and he's trying to get a story. He's trying to get a report from Gail, or he's trying to get a story from Gail. And she's trying to get an interview with Sydney about everything. And
Sydney, like, hey, he's kind of like the evidence didn't show it was him.
Yeah.
So, and then she still doesn't believe it. No, it was you,
And that's what makes it very suspenseful that I liked in this one a little more. Because in this one, there are certain parts where you're kind of questioning if Cotton Weary is kind of belonging. Because
he keeps showing up at the wrong time.
Like, for the scene where she's, like, in the library, and it shows, like, he's wearing similar shoes that the killer wears. It makes it's very...
And his cell phone fell out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all that stuff, yeah.
It really brings in the suspense to a whole new level. Mm-hmm. But also, as the movie goes along, you start to see that the characters that we start to get to know, they start dying one by one. Yeah. Especially, like, minor ones, too. Like, now, I mean, yeah, this was kind of one of our early roles. We got to see Sarah Michelle Gellar's character, where she's actually staying at home and watching a movie and everything, and that was a pretty suspenseful scene where she's talking on the phone, and then all of a sudden the fucking killer comes behind her after he's saying, "Do you want to die tonight?"
Yeah, and then he kills her, which there was a party going on across the street Sydney was at.
Yeah,
yeah,
and then after that, as the movie goes along, you start to see that Sydney is trying to. Basically, there's a subplot going on with her where she's trying to conquer her fear because she talks to the theater director in one part where she's trying to be a fighter, where she no longer wants to be that person like that was helpless like her mother was.
Yeah.
So I love the art they're giving her with this one.
Yeah.
And you also start to see then in this one you also start to see the dynamic between Dewey and Gail, because they start to form a relationship. Mm-hmm. Even though that they're kind of bickering back and forth, you can still feel that they really care for each other.
Not only that, I did like the Broken Arrow theme in there.
Yeah, this movie actually uses the song "Brothers" by Hans Zimmer from Broken Arrow, and they use it very well for Dewey, because I'm watching. I'm like, wow, they're using John Travolta's theme from Broken Arrow for Dewey, but it's a good song.
Yeah, it's a good song. Yeah, it's a good theme. You don't see it no more, but
yeah, but unfortunately, sadly though, this is probably where we get to kind of a controversial part. So as we see that the characters dying back and forth, we get to a really, really important scene that really gets me to the heart. Like, we get to the part where the killer is in broad daylight and he's talking to Randy on the phone, because she's trying to call Gail, but then he says, I know I'm not interrupting anything, am I? And then Ray's like, it's him, he can see us. And so during that scene,
he starts talking about movies and stuff like that again. And
and
he basically draws him to where he needs Randy at, and then he pulls him in the van, and sadly he stabs Randy to death and kills him.
Yeah. Though I do like his line where he's like, what's your favorite scary movie? He's like, Showgirls, absolutely frightening. So, yeah, that was probably the most tragic things that we lost.
Because that's a character I want to keep seeing growing with the series.
That's what I'm saying. Randy was my favorite character.
But I appreciate the suspense they do because that means all bets are off.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I really do like what they did because they made the vulnerability work with the characters.
Yeah.
So, sadly, Randy gets killed. And at first, here's what's also clever about this scene that I like that they built. It's kind of making you think that the cameraman might have done it because there's a scene where he's talking to them at first. You know, the cameraman, the black cameraman.
Yeah.
And he goes to go get something he goes to get coffee. And then when he comes back, he realizes that his van's broken into, and then it makes you wonder if he did it or not.
Yeah, because they pull between him and Cotton Weary. They keep pulling scenes where them two are showing up the wrong time.
Yeah. And so as the movie goes along, so after that, we pretty much see that as the body count starts to rise, we get to after pretty much as the movie goes along, you start to see a lot of Sidney's friends get killed off one by one, and then we get to our climax, which is pretty creative climax because it takes place in a theater. Remember when it's in the play, and they realize
where Jerry O'Connell got like a fraternity thing.
Yeah, he got a hazing done where he's like he's on a cross like Jesus because he gave up his letters. Because there's a part where my favorite parts where they're having lunch and he's doing that song where he gives his letters to. Or he gives his necklace to Sidney.
Yeah. And
that climax happens when we realize that the killer has been watching them the whole time, because remember that scene when Dewey and Gale go to the theater and they see the tapes, they realize the fucking killer has been watching them the whole time on videotape.
Yep.
And so Jerry O'Connell gets killed, and we realize the killer this time is actually Timothy Oliphant.
Yeah, which was in the drama class with him and the film club, and he's been part of all this, and he's been hanging out with them,
Yeah.
And then we find out that he was actually brainwashed by the girl from Roseanne.
Jackie
from Roseanne, and that's Billy's from the first one's mother.
Yeah. Which was a cool twist, because it was like, holy shit, because...
Which one's revenge for killing her son.
Revenge for killing her son, yeah. And so we get to our climax, it's pretty creepy, because, like, I like how they have, like, the props and stuff come down, and they're trying to escape and everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have Cotton Weary come back, where she helps them save the day, and they kill both of them, and the way that it's played out, it's just really fascinating, because, like, it's all about, you know, trying to tie up loose ends, but also showing the fact that Sidney is now able to conquer her fear.
Yeah.
And so, and then in the end, we see Cotton Weary get an arc too, where that's resolved because he finally gets a story.
He helps him and actually shows him actually saving the day, pretty much. He saved the day.
Yeah.
He's actually the reason why they won is because of him. So, yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was a hell of a good sequel. It was an up from the first one, even though I think that they both are even, but hell of a great sequel. I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm going to give it probably a 10 out of 10, because I'll be honest, this is probably my favorite one, because I do love this more than the first one. Like, I think that it captures the vulnerability better with the characters. Yeah. It does the meta humor a lot better. It actually does a lot of suspenseful scenes, especially that scene where where Gale's running away from the killer in the tape room where with all the videotapes, and you can, you know, where he's falling and everything. I love the way that camera pans around. Yeah. So, but yeah, I do really loved it a lot better. So, between this and the next one, we actually got kind of a gap between movies, because the next one, Scream 3, came out in 2000, which was 3 years after 2. Yeah. And believe it or not, this was the first one I saw in the theater. Mm-hmm. And I was 8 years old at the time when I saw it, and pretty much the story goes is you have Cotton Weary, who's now famous, and he's now got his talk show called 100% Cotton.
Yeah. And he's in Hollywood, he's famous and everything, and then he's getting all these calls, and then he gets this one call that, you know, it's a girl, isn't it?
It starts out with a girl who's calling him saying, it's like, oh, I'm a big 100% Cotton fan. And he's like, oh, it's like, so tell me, are you, well, he's asking her, like, what makes you think I have a girlfriend? And then all of a sudden you see the fucking like voice change where he's like, I know you do. I'm here right now. I'm watching her taking a shower.
Yeah,
and that's a fucking
that's when
great
he
scene.
realized it's the Scream fucking voice, and he's like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, so he has to he has to drive to his house quickly. And this is probably my favorite part right here because
this right here actually brought this band to light, and I really addicted to this song. This is from Creed. What if?
What if? Yeah.
Oh god, dude, this is what made me find Creed.
Yeah, this song because it plays where his girlfriend is getting out of the shower and she's going down. She's like investigating, like she's hearing the music play downstairs, and it plays that song by Creed. What if you did?
What if you? I still love that.
I love that band, but I also I really love that song. And so she investigates she's going down to see what happens, and then you think it's Cotton's voice because apparently now the killer can change voices. Yeah. So. She thinks it's kind of weird, but it's actually the killer that shows up.
Yeah.
And then she's going to try to escape, and then she unfortunately gets killed, and then Cotton is like trying to survive from the killer, but then he...
that was a good vulnerability thing, where he's beating the shit out of him, and then he's saying that last thing to him.
He's like, it was a simple game, Cotton. You should have told me where Sydney was. Now you lose. And then he stabs him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great opening for Cotton Weary. I was like,
whoa, he's fucking dead. And then we get this scene where we open up, where it's actually kind of like an emotional thing, where Sydney's living a secluded life. 1 did damage to her, but 2 really fucked her up because now she knows that there's going to be more probably happening. Now she has a bunch of anxiety where she's afraid to be in public, afraid to trust, afraid to go anywhere, and she's doing a suicide hotline. She's working for a suicide hotline through her home.
Yeah, where she's working as a psychologist, pretty much, and she's dealing with a lot of patients who are dealing with a lot of suicidal problems. And as the movie goes along, you start to also get back introduced to Gail Weathers, who's now wrote a book about the events that took place in the previous movie.
Yeah,
and we also find out that Dewey is now working for Hollywood as a security guard or he's like a. I think he's
agent.
He's like an agent or something for this new film they're working on that's actually Stab 3.
Yeah.
And we also get introduced another character played by Patrick Dempsey, who's the detective on the case of the murder of Cotton Weary.
Yeah.
So as the film goes along, you start to see them reunite. And what I love about this one is I love that they go into really detail about the making of, because they really do. And they discover that there's a new film that's being worked on called Stab 3, and we start to see that the characters are coming together again from after all these time. And what I really love about this film is I love how they go into the detail of the making of.
Yeah, see, now they go, instead of just doing the movies and theaters, they actually show us, they're in Hollywood, like you said, he's an agent now, Dewey is, and he's working on set, and each one of these people are paying homage to the characters from the real life, and that we get to actually see the scenes and stuff. And the thing that really brings me out this scene the most, that really I like this movie a lot, was the scene where Sydney is brought back to her original roots of the house that was remade.
Yeah, because
that was actually pretty fucking creepy.
That was very effective, because not only does it bring back things full circle like from the first film, but it also makes her try to confront her past like she did in the first movie. Well, like she did in the first one, because in the first one it dealt with her mother, and this time because she's going through that post-traumatic stress disorder, she's dealing with a lot of dream sequences that involve her mother.
And it's showing her dead body. Kind of remind me of Pet Sematary 2 type feel.
Yeah, it did feel like that. Yeah. And it was actually very effective, because I thought, when I first seen it, I thought it was fucking creepy. When it had the mother, as a ghost and shit.
Yeah.
But, and also we had, as the movie goes along, you start to see the body count come up.
And the people in this movie that are remaking, that are really doing this movie, like Stab 3, that's playing these characters, are dying in certain orders.
Yeah, they're dying in certain orders, like from a script that the killer is actually rewriting. So there's actually the events that are taking place in the actual Stab 3 movie, the killer is actually rewriting in different order. Yeah. And they're being killed, the people that he's killing are actually reminiscent of the people in real life. Like, for example, you have the blonde-haired chick, or you have Jenny McCarthy's character, who's the equivalent of Drew Barrymore's character from the first one. Mm-hmm. And she's actually the first one that dies. Mm-hmm. And then you have the other guy, I'm sorry. And then you have other characters that are archetypes, like the Parker Posey character. She's playing Gale. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And so, what I like about this one is, I like that they at least tied things really well with the first one again, but I also like the making of aspect, because they do a lot more meta this time than they did with the other ones. Yeah. But they don't really do much humor-wise. They do it more of a straightforward, And also in Scream 3, we remember, and also we had that scene where we get introduced to Randy's sister, who has a videotape, and it reveals that Randy recorded something before he died, showing the rules of a trilogy. And it showed that in this videotape, he's saying that anyone, including the main character, can die, and that pretty much you have to pretty much cryogenically freeze his head or blow him up. Yeah. And then he also said that the past can come back and haunt you. Yeah.
Yeah, so later on in this film, like he said, we got Patrick Dempsey playing an actual cop that is starting to find the bodies going up. Now Sydney's seeing people dying around her again. Dewey and Gail's there. They're helping her get through this. And as they're all getting attacked, Sydney almost gets killed at the house from the first movie. The house remade. And so later in this film, she's pretty much tired of it, and she's ready to play the closure. And the killer calls her, and he captures Dale and Dewey, and says he captured them and says, "You ready for this to be the final act?" Yeah. And he goes, "Come to this house," and you say to him, "But meet the real maker."
And what's really fascinating about this climax is that, in a strange way, it kind of reminds me of Clue. Because it all takes place at a mansion and stuff.
Yeah, and then shit happens at the mansion. Even that director, Lance
Henriksen
gets killed and brutal, with his throat slit and all that. Yeah. That was pretty brutal. So we get through the scenes where she's got to save them, Dewey and Gale, and when she is trapped, the killer comes out and reveals himself, and ends up being her brother.
Her half-brother.
Her half-brother. And he goes into this really great detail, and we get an actual history of what everything we've never seen actually happen. We find out her mother was a whore, she was fucking other people around.
She was fucking Billy's dad from the first one.
First movie, and fucking all these people out. And then I believe that the killer, her half-brother, which is her half-brother, which was an awesome fucking
That twist. Was a great twist.
I was like, whoa, that's her brother. He's like, it's me, your brother.
Yeah.
Your other half. And then, he reveals it, and it's the dude that we see throughout this film, which is also the bad part of it, because we already knew kind of had the film. But anyways, not talking about that too much. Then he starts to talk about the history, and then we get to learn that he actually set up Billy and all them. He was the guy who started it all. He had Billy and Stu try to kill her in the first one, and then he helped Timothy and all them and the mother track her down to get her, try to kill her in the second one, and then, he said, fuck it, I'm taking it in my own hands.
Yeah, and I really like that, how they did that. But also, I like, too, how the killer is able, from a direct technical standpoint, I like the way that the direction goes in the house. Like the way that they do a lot of these cool shots, like the part with the mirror when he's killing that one girl and everything. Yeah, yeah. I really the production design is really fantastic in the way they do in this house. Yeah. So we get to our climax that involves that happening where he reveals himself to her, and I got to tell you right now, that right there is one of the best closures you can get from the first one.
Yeah, I thought that was a perfect trilogy ending right there.
Yeah, and so we get to the end where the detective and Dewey and Gale break in, and then Dewey kills the killer, and we get actually a closure where Dewey actually proposes to Gale.
Yeah.
And then
you get a closure to where, like, this door opens up, and it's the wind blowing, and you think there's going to be something killer, and then you get the reveal that it's nothing there. It's over with.
But the door is, like, still open, so...
Yeah, it shows that it's still open, but it shows that because nobody came through, it's over with.
Yeah, and that, to me, is a great ending right there.
Yeah. I enjoyed this movie. It's not as good as the first two, but, I mean, for a trilogy pack, with the whole, it's an actual blood brother as, like, the killer, and he started it all from 1, 2, and he was so psychologically damaged to what the mother did to his life that he cared about Sydney so much that it fucking pissed him off, and he lost it.
Yeah.
I did like that.
I do like this film. Like, I don't like it quite as much as the first two.
No, the first two were better.
Because my only problems is that the film doesn't really have much suspense-wise, because we know who the fucking killer is throughout it. But the twist they revealed does hold that for me, though.
Yeah.
So I do like what they did with that, but also I liked all... I also love the whole, the whole making of aspect they do.
Yeah.
And the fact that, we're showing the arc finally going through with Sydney.
Yeah, so what do you say?
I give it probably a 8.75 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm going to go an 8.5 out of 10 on this one.
Yeah, it's definitely something I do like, but it's not really like, actually, no, I'd say probably like a 8.5 out of 10. Like, it's got its moments, but another problem I did have was I wasn't really too big on Parker Posey's character. I thought she kind of annoyed me in some parts, so yeah, it's about 8.5.
8.5 out of 10 for me. So we get to years later.
So we took quite a long break. Now, first of all, I didn't realize they were ever going to do another one after this, because I thought this was the final one. So, 2011 comes around, and
how many years passed?
It's 11. 11 years later, we get Scream 4, which went through quite a lot of different, like, chain development, because Wes Craven was very skeptical about coming back, and so was the cast, so they were really kind of really skeptical about coming back, and Wes Craven didn't want to come back unless Kevin Williamson was involved, and lo and behold, because Kevin Williamson did the third one, he got involved with the fourth one now. Yeah. So now we get to Scream 4, which is actually it's 15 years after the first film.
Yeah.
And it takes the film opens with probably a really clever opening where it does like a stab, like it does like multiple stab sequels in this universe that they set up,
which is cool, but it also threw me off a lot, and it was also getting annoying after it overdid it a little bit. Because I noticed, like, alright, it did it like 1, 2, I was like, okay, then it kept tricking me, okay, you got me that time. Then I noticed it did it again, and then again, I'm like, alright, man, can we, and then, they kept talking about Channing Tatum too much in that scene, which was getting annoying as fuck. I was like, alright, girls, come on now.
Yeah.
That was the year where Channing Tatum was getting talked about all the time. So I thought it was clever to put it in the movie.
Yeah, so I'll give you that.
I was kind of getting burnt out. I understand the stab things, but then when they got to it, I was like, hell yeah, alright, yeah. And then they kill the girls and stuff, and then we get into the movie where it's actually pretty cool and clever, like where they open up and it's the town of Woodsboro, and it has like the Scream people hanging up on things everywhere.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool. It was the anniversary coming up, and it was also an anniversary because Sydney was going to come into town and do signings. And
yeah, and she's on there with her publicist there, and they find out that, and she also has a cousin this time, because this time her cousin is getting weird phone calls from a killer who had killed one of her friends.
Yeah.
And so, as the movie goes along, you start to see that the killer, as we find out later, is actually filming the murders as he's actually doing everything, like similar to what they did in part 2.
Yeah.
So we get it to where since Sydney has come back, she's trying to revisit her. She's basically revisiting her past, and we start to see that the killer is actually is trying to redo some things that are from like the first film, because this film is very nostalgic in a way, because a lot of the characters they introduce, especially like the younger kids, they are pretty much archetypes like we had with the first film.
And because of so many years has passed, it's actually updating its version of like how we got the prep girls.
Yeah.
I did say I did like the whole where they did stab 8, 9, 10, making fun of how movies now are getting 10, 11, 12, 13 sequels.
Yeah.
And then it's also making I get like, yeah.
I do, because basically we get introduced to other characters like the I think it was Roy Culkin's character, who's basically the Randy equivalent, and him and his friend are having like these cameras that are attached to like,
they
their
work
heads.
for like the camera class in school or
something. And they host their own film club. And so they're talking about how sequels or reboots are pretty much the basics now. And now
so that's what it's doing. It's a
satire on reboots.
And it was also did a stint of making fun of remakes. Franchises.
Yeah.
Franchises make 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 movies.
Yeah. And which is cool, because I like that aspect, how they're pretty much saying, in order to basically do something, the killer has to be filming the murders as he's doing it. And that means that
found
footage, yeah. Which is a really unique concept.
Yeah.
And so, and also, anyone pretty much can die. Yeah. The killer has no fucking rules.
Yeah. Now this is like anybody can go.
So.
But anyways, back to what
And then now, as the movie goes along, you start to see that the body count's running up, and then we get to actually starting to see some really gory shit this time.
I know, it was really
like that scene where
the cops
get killed, but also that part where the girl across the street is getting killed, and she got like her fucking intestines cut out.
That one that kept getting stabbed like a million times, dude.
Yeah,
like, brutal, dude. And Sydney now realizes it's fucking coming back again, and then we also find out that Dewey's actually the head.
He's the sheriff now.
Yeah. Well, he's the sheriff, chief police now. He's the head boss now.
And he's also married to Gail. And Gail is now trying to get her own story by trying to... Well, first she tries to recruit with like the film boys to see if they can do something for her story. But then she realizes that they're not doing anything, so she tries to go rogue.
Didn't she retire?
She did, but she wanted to get back into the game. Yeah. And then... This is what kind of really got me interested, because at first, it really threw me off if they were going to do this. The movie goes along where you're kind of thinking that the killer is going to be killing off our main three, because...
I thought that was going to happen. Yeah, I thought they were all going to get popped, or somebody was going to get popped.
Because there's a part where the killer is filming the murder, filming what's going on, and then he attacks Gail. At that point, I thought Gail was going to get killed.
I thought Gail or Dewey or somebody was going to lose their life in this, or Sydney was going to go out with a bang, and that was it.
Yeah. But then, as it goes along, you start to see that the killer is able to fold the people into setting up different tasks. Like, remember that one scene where... let's see, I'm trying to think. But what I also like, too, is that the whole meta humor that they did is pretty catchy with how they wrap around the whole film the murders aspect, and also the way that we're starting to see now how Sydney has matured as a woman, and she's starting to understand a lot of what her cousin's going through, because her cousin is kind of going through the same thing that she did when she was younger. Yeah. So I really do like that. And I do like Emma Roberts. I thought she did pretty good. And then I also liked how in the end, when we get to our climax, it shows this is a really good fucking twist right here, where it turns out that the entire time the killer was actually her fucking cousin, and it was actually the other kid, Kieran or Roy Culkin. Yeah, which threw me off. I was like, "Holy shit!" And
and it was him, and then we find out it's the cousin.
Yeah, it was
Sydney's cousin, which was really kind of did throw me off, because I didn't expect her to be a killer.
That's what I'm saying. That was a great fucking twist.
It's a good twist and stuff, and I was really shocked at that. And then Sydney ends up having to take out her cousin and killing her, and and all that stuff. But my problem with the film that I had I didn't really care for that Panettiere.
Hayden Panettiere? Yeah.
She was annoying as fucking.
She was. Dude. She bothered me. Plus, I didn't like the publicist girl, that Sydney's publicist girl. I thought she was annoying.
Yeah.
And
the one that was like, oh, Sydney, you're famous.
Yeah,
or, no, not Sydney, just Sydney, but she was really into Gail a lot. Like, oh, Gail. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. But not just that, but my problem with the film, too, is I thought, well, a couple of the deaths are pretty gruesome. Yeah. I did feel like a lot of them were just kind of standard stabby. You know, you didn't really... Like the part where he kills the postist, they could have done so much more with that.
Yeah.
Because... it was suspenseful, but at the same time, I already knew that...
I get what they were trying to do with Scream 4, with the whole, like... Because they've done, like, they want to capture everything that movies do today. But for some reason, I just felt like they just could have just... I mean, it's not a bad movie, it's just, like... I just felt like the trilogy was already perfect. Yeah,
I did feel like it was more of an... It was necessary because it was a good stab at how we do with fucking reboots nowadays. Yeah. So I can understand why they would do the fourth one.
Yeah.
I just feel like, because they kind of waited too long. It was good seeing the cat. Yeah,
it's cool.
It's cool seeing. It's cool for us nostalgic for the first three movies.
Yeah.
But good seeing the cast again, of course.
Yeah.
But I just feel like, because this is Wes Craven's last film, may he rest in peace, they could have done something that could have made us more, like, impactful for our main three leads. Mm-hmm. Because if they would have changed the ending where one of them died, that would have resulted into something...
we didn't have our all bets are off or anything like we were having. Like, you notice after every one of these films, we've had a main cast die. Like, a big, like, vulnerability.
Yeah.
This one didn't do that at all.
It was mainly just the newer characters.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you had Randy die in 2. Then you had Cotton Weary die in 3.
Yeah.
And then, like, the people that you thought were going to live in 1 died. And then this one, nothing like that happened.
That's what I'm saying. Like, and not just that, but it just seemed like with this one, they took their time with trying to come up with a good ending. Because I remember hearing something about how the ending they had to like probably reshoot or something like that. So if they would have ended where the cousin is actually getting away with the murders, that would have been a great fucking ending, because it makes you think that Cindy is actually dead.
Yeah.
And because if she actually died, then that would have been a great fucking closure.
Yeah.
You know. But overall, I'm going to give the movie probably a 8.5 out of 10. Or, sorry, 8.75 out of 10. I like it a little more than 3, because at least this one has better suspense. And at least it had some things going for it as far as the humor. Mm-hmm. But as far as the actual overall arc, I do like 3 more.
Yeah. I'm different. This is my least favorite of this series, but it wasn't bad. It was just, like, it was okay for me. I'm going to go a 7 out of 10, and I think that's being nice. I kind of want to give it a 6.5 out of 10, because I'm not saying it's bad. It was good. I'd own it. It's just, I just don't think it didn't live up to its hype that it should have been. And so I'm going to be nice at least and give it a 7 out of 10, because it's still watchable.
Yeah.
I felt like a lot of the newer people who played the newer characters were annoying as shit. So some of them I found Panettiere was really bothering me in this film. And I'm gonna be nice. I'll be nice and give it a 7 out of 10. Yeah.
Fair enough.
It is my least favorite of the series. So.
Alrighty, well, we thank you so much, everyone, for listening to our retrospective of the Scream franchise. What did you guys think of the franchise what did you guys think of the Scream movies? Did you comment below, and if you guys like what you see here, you can check out more of our retros on SoundCloud and on YouTube as well, and we'll be having more of them coming up here soon. We'll see you guys later.